Okay, cool. Got some people joining here now. So hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us so far. If you've been to any of our webinars before, or if not, then thank you for joining us. So we're very excited to be here today. We'll give it a couple of minutes just for everyone to find the links and join in. So in the meantime, if you guys want to put into the chat box to just introduce yourself and to say at what stage you're currently at with your business. So if it's you're just starting up, haven't started yet, 1 to 2 years, that sort of thing, it'd be great to know and give Zoe a bit of feedback as to how, what kind of branding experience you guys have so far. Hi Paola from Derbyshire. It's great here too, don't worry. Yeah, if you guys want to pop any of that information into the chat box, that would be amazing. And then yeah, in 5 minutes or so we'll make a more professional start, but feel free to, as many of you do have your cameras on, or feel free to turn them off. At the end we'll have more of an opportunity to interact. Okay, great. We've got Katie, who's a programmer looking to develop a brand. Great. So not quite started yet. Wonderful.
As far as what you're going to learn today, it's fine if you haven't started, because actually you're almost doing it in the methodical order of doing that first. If you've started, then it's equally fine, sort of retrospectively looking at some of it and strengthening what you're already doing. So there's no wrong or right answer to this, or you're not in a better or worse position. But certainly if you're at the early stages, it's a really useful topic to be sort of thinking about before you actually launch anything. And I'm Zoe, hello, from Slingshot. On there.
Yeah, so we'll do proper introductions very shortly, just in a couple more minutes. But now we've got Paola, who's been over a year, Manny Mekala, one of our LDC brands, so thanks so much for joining. We'll be covering a lot, and I'm sure we'll be going over this in the course of the webinar as well, but this is obviously a 4-part series, so do feel free to sign up to each webinar. They'll all kind of feed into one another, and then we'll get like a really good idea of branding and everything. And Zoe's also running some really exciting programs which she can share more information about shortly. And yeah, I mean, Zoe's here with her incredible pink hair. Making me wish I'd made a bit more effort today, but
I tell you what, I'm locked down, homeschooling 2 children and working, and so this is a one-off. You I've got clothes on today. It's not my
such an honor.
I know. Lucky you. But my side hustle as well is I used to have a shop myself, but I sell vintage. So actually to the side of me here is rails of vintage for a couple of virtual markets I'm doing. So I've literally, it's quite nice. I've just grabbed off of my vintage rail. It's quite easy yeah, all the hustles. But I think
no, definitely. Yeah.
Fashion consultant. I think, it's I've been doing what I do a long time, and I know we'll do a proper intro, but we launched a program of workshops at the beginning of the first lockdown in a reaction to trying to help creatives pivot through this. And it does feel quite mad that literally 1 year on to be kind of in still a lockdown and sort of having semi-similar conversations, but with a new perspective of a year on of this new evolved world that we're in, and actually the branding side actually almost becomes more of a big topic.
Definitely.
The more this kind of thing goes on, really, to be honest with you, because it's the strength of so much of it in business, and I think it's definitely more and more important. It's
definitely, and I think we're seeing a lot of changes, and one of the great things that we're going to look at in this webinar is learning how to cut through the noise. And I feel like there's so much noise, especially now.
So much noise.
We're very much focused on digital. So this is going to be a great way to kind of learn how to cut through that and stick true to your brand. So let's go ahead and make a start. So thank you everyone for joining us here today. I'm Amanda. I am the events manager for Name Design Club. If you have joined any of these before, you will have seen my face plenty of times. And I am currently overseeing the LDC Accelerator. So this is our first big series of the year, which we're super excited to be running with Zoe. Not just because of her cool hairstyles, but her amazing content and leadership. But yeah, thank you so much everyone for joining. I will be here as host, just monitoring the chat box. So if you have any questions, please do pop them into the chat box. Please interact as much as possible. We will be taking all questions at the end. So if anything does get covered, feel free to kind of bring it up and we can kind of recap towards the end if you would like more information on anything specifically. And also towards the end, please feel free to introduce yourselves, come on and speak and tell us a bit more about your brand and exactly what you're looking for. I think it'll be really helpful both myself and Zoe to learn exactly what it is that you guys want to know about branding so that we can ensure we're helping you. And I think Zoe's going to have some exciting homework for everyone. So something else to look forward to there.
Yeah, I mean, that is lovely to see everyone today. And I think on the basis of all the challenges that we're all going through, especially if anyone does have children and is going through all of that, especially at bloody half term, it's an added, I can see nods from Lise, it's such a whole nother layer to the whole thing. So not only sort of battling through the challenges of pandemics and setting up a small business in general, which, I've done these talks out, it's not just a pandemic topic. In normal life, it's or whatever normal life is challenging enough. So there's a lot of layers to what everyone's tackling. But what I would say in the outset is, and I said this a year ago, and I still stand by it, and even more so, is that even though it's a really challenging time, it's actually a really exciting time for small business, and you have the power at the moment. What we have seen over the last year, and I'll tell you a bit more about my agency in general, but one thing actually for me in pivoting, or for us as an agency, is we've set up a stronger influencer and creatives representation part of the agency. And actually, it's crazy the way things have evolved even more. But I think what we have seen is the big businesses are the ones that have been slightly buggered this year because they can't be agile. They're not able to cut through the agility that's required at this time when, sort of a year ago, it was like you can't plan a week or two in advance. And it's almost similar now. But actually, as a small business, you have such a brilliant opportunity to make a lot of noise, to have that strength. Everyone's much more focused on supporting small business, sustainability, inclusivity. So I think don't be daunted and think that as a small business that it's a worse time. I actually think it's a really exciting time. So if you're just launching, don't be afraid, do it. If you're already in there and in early stages, or even if you've been going 5 years, it's a really brilliant time to strengthen. And for you in what you're doing, this is the perfect workshop course to be on and series, because it's a really important time for strengthening everything that you're doing. And so that when you put anything out to the world and sort of talking a bit more about the whole awareness and communication side of things, that it's the strength of what you're doing, and that you can help people to identify your USP and relate and connect with your brand. So that's just a little side note in the outset, that it is, you are, it's brilliant that you're doing what you do. It's brilliant that you're still here discussing strengthening what you do. And I just want to send you all sort of, that, I'm sending you the positivity and power, but you are definitely on the right course and doing the right thing. Literally path course and LDC path of course. So my name is Zoe Lem. I currently have a creative agency called Slingshot. I'm going to share my screen with you. I personally have been in the fashion industry for over 25 years. I was a stylist for about 20 years first, and doing all sorts, from celebrities, editorial. I worked with Trini and Susanna for many years. I did the global look for Al Jazeera English when that launched, Robbie Williams videos and all sorts. So was a stylist for a long time, had a shop called My Sugarland, which was one of the first concept stores about 12 years ago, whilst pregnant. And had my labours on the shop floor, actually, which was interesting. The customers all really got to know the brand. And that was in the early stages of a lot of these independent brands and sort of emerging creatives really coming forwards. And we did a lot of support. We used to sell graduate collections as well as big designers and vintage. And then sort of in the last few years have been doing a lot of mentoring and business coaching. So I do a lot of creative mentoring and supporting people along the way of their journey, whatever creative, not just fashion, music, entertainment and all sorts. And then sort of almost 5 years ago, set up Slingshot, which I'm going to now show you my screen, I think, whilst I'm talking. And Slingshot, even more actually. Can you all see my screen? Yeah. Slingshot is it's a creative agency, but actually agile, very focused on inclusivity, diversity, and sustainability. So for us, it's very much about focusing on those areas within business, but also helping people to become more focused on those areas. So I'm just struggling to, oh, there we go. So here is a little bit, actually move you along. And very focused on innovation, on strategy, which sounds boring when you're creative, but actually we always talk about strategic disruption and actually fuck it up with a plan. So if you can create a lot of noise, and you can think outside the box to do things differently, but you do need a plan within all of this. The part of the branding is creating strategy around everything, and that doesn't mean creating lots of big documents. Strategic thinking is just thinking about what you're trying to achieve longer term, and then almost creating those steps backwards to meet that. So it's a plan, which I think quite often as creatives, plans fall by the wayside, and people focus so much on the creative and making and designing, or the sort of creative part of it. And very often, a lot of the mentoring I do is helping people to think about the other areas of business, and to kind of make sure that it's a very solidified and full packaged offering what you're doing. It doesn't mean as a small business, you do often have to be a little bit of a jack of all trades, because quite often people are doing it themselves on their own, and you end up having to learn skills that you never imagined that you would need to be doing whilst doing the bit that you love and the fun creative bits. But I think that through having an understanding, even depending on your stage as you grow, even if you don't down the line do the communications or deal with all the branding, having an understanding of a lot of the areas will really help you as a small business, and help you to think about all the different stages rather than just creating a product or a service and trying to get it out there. It's thinking about the customer, thinking about the brand and the strengthening of that, thinking about sort of marketing, all of the areas together. You'll be able to think a little bit more rounded. So as an agency, we do a mixture of branding, marketing, PR. We do a lot of mentoring and business coaching. We run various programs and workshops, and then we have the representation side where we look after, I don't know, I've got a drag queen called Virgin X. I've got a trans makeup artist called Joseph Harwood. I've got Clara Rolling Funky, who is a wheelchair using black model and influencer. So lots and lots of amazing people that have really strong messages, and it's just become very fortuitous with what I've always done, that actually now people give a bit of a shit about inclusivity and the other areas. So it's a big part of what we do. And I think especially in a pandemic and as the world's evolved, it's become much more of a focus more widely within industry and business. So it's again, I won't talk about that side of things too much, but certainly if you have any questions around it relating to the branding in your business, then happy to answer that. As Amanda said, just any questions, then this is your time with me on this topic. I was going to say ask me anything. There might be some boundaries to that, but ask any questions that are going to help you. You've got me for this next period of time. We've got this series that we're running, and they will follow on, because for me and for what we do, I can teach you the skills and the techniques around any of these topics. But one of the big things is about mindset. And actually the next one next week, we're going to talk more about mindset and mindset changing, and also looking more as we go, and then the following one about how to be agile and strengthened during the pandemic and this changing time. But it is all about mindset. And to be honest with you, if you don't get anything else out of this session today, apart from it's making you think a bit differently and it's changing your mindset a little bit, then you've got as much as I wanted you to get out of it. And then if you get any more than that, then it's brilliant, because branding is about mindset. And like I say, you can learn techniques. You can go on Google to learn elements of some types of branding, but the way that I like to teach it and work within it is it's about mindset. Even when we work with a client and do a big branding project, we would never take it away, do a project and hand it back. They have to be on the journey with us, because otherwise they've not changed their mindset to think in a brand orientated way. So even if it just makes you think, then you've really got enough out of it. And I think especially where we're at, just this little period after Christmas, and with all the challenges we've got, it's about feeding your mind little and often and making those changes and going through a process. So what I talked to you today about, welcome to do screenshots. The slides won't be available afterwards, but you're welcome to screenshot, make notes. And I think that it's going to be available on YouTube afterwards. But some of this you can read again afterwards if you take shots of it. But just try to absorb and sort of get into your head a little bit on this, because it will help you as far as how you think about what you're doing. And like I say, as much as I can, I'm here to guide you through it. It is, like I say, it is a process. So this is just a flash. People think that branding is about a logo. It's not. That's just your mark. That's the graphics around it. That's just the mark that supports your branding, but just a little flash up there. So it's about perception. It's really what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's about a feeling. It's about an experience. It's what it feels like. So yes, what your brand looks like is important, because that backs up the branding work and the values and stuff that we're going to talk about. That's just the visual representation of your brand. What a brand actually is about perception, feelings, experiences. It's about things feel like, think like, speak like, and how you talk. It's everything to do with what you put out there in the world about your brand. So often, and this has been over my whole time, 25 years I've been working in fashion, people, and especially fashion or within a product-based industry, they have an idea, they create something, they then make it, spend all their money on making it. They then think that they need to get it out to the world, so they jump onto PR and pay for PR, and then miss this whole branding section out. And what they create is products, and you sell products. And really, what you need to be doing is selling your brand, sell the world of what you do, not just the products. Don't talk about the skirts or the dresses or the jewelry that you make. Talk about what your brand feels like, because that's what's going to connect with your audience. If they want a skirt, there's lots of different places they can go to find a skirt or a dress. You're competing on a massive market. But if you create a brand which has a feeling, and you find the audience and understand that audience really well, then the two things together, that's where the magic happens. It's the world of your brand that you want to think about creating. And obviously social media becomes a big tool for that, not the only tool, but at the moment especially, it's a really big tool to use. But you, even within your social media, which we're not necessarily talking about that too much in this series, but it's that whole communication of what you do. Don't put loads of products up and just start selling. Why are people not buying what I'm doing? They want to connect with, they want to align with your values, which we're going to talk about. And really, it's building credibility, and the coming together of all of these different identities and marks and methodology, and the services. So it's about differentiating yourself, which in this world where we are now, even more so, you know, if you are in that athleisure fitnessy world, or if you're in the well-being zone of what you're doing on any level, then you're even more competing on a massive platform. Now that doesn't mean it's not a good idea, but on any level, or any business, and certainly creative businesses, you are trying to compete on a sort of wide scale. It does give focus to what you're doing, and actually once you set your values and the underpinning of your brand and business, it really helps decision making. You know, I say it from a styling perspective, when you start giving people colors that suit them, or shapes that suit them, it's like, oh, that makes it more full on and scary. No, actually it doesn't. When you go in a shop, you now know you don't look at that wall, you don't look at that wall, you just look at that. It makes it very focused. And it's the same with this. When you know who you are internally, it makes decision making very easy. So whether you're deciding, do I use that image for a campaign or that one, if you keep going back to your values and the underpinning of your business, it makes decisions really, really easy. And even relating to collaborations that you should enter into, or partnerships, or whether or not you should be involved in an event, whether you should use that model, this model. If you just keep going back to your values and that underpinning, it's like your Bible. When we do branding for clients and we do a whole brand Bible for them, it is literally that. It becomes a guide and a kind of a checklist. So whether you've got a website person that's working with you, it becomes a guide that you give them, you know, whether it's sort of your values and the spirit and what it looks like. It becomes a part of the guide that anyone that does anything with you, if you employ staff, it becomes a part of that rhetoric that they know, you know, that it gives less opportunity for mistakes or for miscommunication when you get some of this right. It's obviously a really good way to communicate your message, and you know, and further develop the business and brand. You know, people always think that branding as a sort of business within business is just for big companies, and it's really not. It's for, even as an individual or creative, if you're a freelance graphic designer or stylist or photographer or fitness trainer, it's still something that you should be thinking about, and a way that you should be thinking. We do quite a lot of personal branding for people, and it's the more, even as an individual, you think like a brand, it means that companies or anyone that you want to interact with you, it becomes more of a synergy, and again, it becomes an extension of your world. But it also becomes very easy for people to understand whether or not they should be connecting with you, and again, whether it's that alignment. Now, all this said, not all big brands are brilliant at branding and do the work they should be. And actually, maybe the more you sort of learn, or if you come on this series, you might start to identify that as well. They're not all brilliant at branding, and they don't all put the time and effort into it as they perhaps should. And actually, you might think about brands that you connect with on a personal level and why you connect with them. And I think even more so now, it's not just that you like the sweatpants or the earrings they make, that you physically like. You connect with the brand on some level, you know, whether you align with their ethics around sustainability, or whether you feel like you connect with them on a level. It's not just about you engaging with that product. it is, for those that are setting up, it is a brilliant time to think about branding, because you are starting with that, with the foundations and the underpinning. But it's not too late once you've started. And again, we do this for businesses, you know, that have been going a long time. I mean, I did quite a big project for a glasses brand that had been going 10 years. So you can go back in and do the work and then strengthen. So it is not a problem if you've been going 5 years, 10 years. It's never too late to think like a brand and to do this work. You know, it's okay. You just approach it very slightly differently, because you've already got the information. You've already got some information about your customer. You've got some information about the world that you're inhabiting and the industry that you're trying to engage with. And it, you know, and positioning is really important, whether you are trying to set yourself up as whatever, a middle of the, you know, sort of mid-markets, I don't know, t-shirt brand or whatever, to understand who you are and who sits near you positioning wise helps you to understand sort of everything, really, from pricing to customers to everything. We work, and this is maybe getting, well, when we do I'm talking to you today within the process so that you understand, and this is how we go through it. So it really helps you to do this like a brand, but we work on a brand key. And it all comes back to this big idea, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it's going through this stage by stage so that you understand, even if you know, you might think you know what your benefits are, you might think you know about your customer, you might think you know about many of these areas. It's really good to do this anyway, every now and then, to ask these questions. And I'm a strong believer, and within my business and way that we work in general, is ask good questions and you get good answers. And I think that boils down, that goes for everything. You know, today, you know, it's like people always say, don't ask something you can get answered on Google. Ask a good question that you're going to get an answer to, that's really going to help you and help your growth and understanding of something. And that goes for customers too. You know, people don't ask their customers enough questions. They make presumptions and assumptions. And I think in general, it's, you know, gaining more understanding about all of the areas is super important. So root strength is just when you strip it all back, what is it that makes you great? You know, not just, oh, I make really nice skirt shapes, or I make really, you know, what is it that makes you great? What got you there in the first place? If you're setting up, what do you want that to be? You know, what is it within your skill set that you're bringing to it that creates that, you know, root strength? And it's and, you know, what is it that you do better than anyone else? Because really you need there needs to be something there, because otherwise, why? You know, why is someone coming to you? And if you can't answer that, and if there's not an answer, then you do really need to go back to your kind of basic sort of I guess business proposition. Because if you're not offering anything else or giving anyone a reason to come to you rather than anyone else, then it makes it very difficult to sort of market yourself and push yourself out in the industry. So as I said, positioning is about where you sit overall within the market and within trends. And I don't mean fashion trends, but sort of trends within what's going on. And the competitive market is not just other brands. It's also, you know, sort of micro and macro view. You know, there's things you can control and things you can't control, but you do need to understand how that has an impact on you. Obviously, there's shitloads this year that we've not been able to control, that we're all having to react to. But then actually, you know, within your strengths, it's understanding how you've been able to react to that, and how you've how you've handled the sort of hand we've been dealt this year, and how you've been able to evolve and maybe pivot even within what you're doing, is, you know, becomes a strength, but it's also sort of part of that macro sort of environment that we have to be mindful of. The customers and audience, I mean, I say audience as well, because even within social, it's an audience as well as being a customer base. Ideally, they're all customers, but quite often, you know, we have an audience, and then it's about how we sort of convert all of them to customers. and how do they speak and how do they think? And again, this is maybe not fully in this series, it might be something that we look at doing again after this is another, but it's one of the second biggest areas within your business is branding, but then customer, and it's the two areas that people don't spend enough time on. Understanding not just where do they shop. I remember when I studied fashion marketing over 25 years ago, it was in the day of Sears being the big group, and it was very much, her name's Jenny, she's this, she goes there, she does that, and it was very much that old style sort of customer profiling. That's not the case now, and for the way that we work in it generally, it's much more important to understand how they feel, how they speak, what they give a shit about, what's their values, to find customers that align with your values, because that's really where the magic happens. You find a customer that shares your values, and then it's about how you help them to understand the benefit in what you're doing, so that they sort of connect and then convert and become customers. The values is what you believe in, what do you stand for, and this is the brand and not you personally. If you're a single sort of one-man band kind of designer maker business and don't have big teams at the moment, or even small teams, it's not you, it's your brand. So focus on the brand and business that you have, and it's not about it being personal, but it determines all the choices that you make. It determines how you act, what you believe in, what you align with. Brand alignment, even if it's not for collaborations, who you put yourself next to, or sort of even link with in general, it has to be about shared values, because otherwise it's not authentic. And even though authenticity is a word that has been used for a long time, even more so in the world that we're in at the moment, it's even more important. People are just not into bullshit. Not that they were before, but you really can't get away with any bullshit anymore, because people just don't have time for it. They have gone back to their real, or some not back to, they've found much more of their sort of their true selves, I guess, on a way, and values, because people are realizing life's a bit too short. So understanding the values of your customer base is super important. The benefits, so that's both emotional and functional. So the practical benefits of what you do, excuse me, and the emotional benefits of, maybe it's how it's going to make them feel. It might be that you are doing whatever, I don't know, clothing for women that have had children or whatever, and it might make them, there's a big element of how it makes you feel, or it might be underwear that's, so the emotional connection as well. The personality and spirit is a really important part of it. Let's not make this all too linear and sort of factual. The personality is that what brings it to life. So when we talk about the world, you've got the values of what you give a shit about, the benefits, you've got the strengths, but then the spirit and personality is what brings it to life. That helps to determine, the language you use, the types of imagery that you use, where you position yourself, that spirit of what you're doing. Then the reasons to believe is the proof. It's almost the proof that you can deliver. So if you are, for example, doing anything to do with sustainability, you can't make promises and not have some level of backing up, because otherwise it becomes very inauthentic. So the reasons to believe is, you might be able to offer a completely 100% sustainable experience for your customers, but then suddenly they find out actually you don't do zero waste, or so you have to think about this from all levels and be consistent. Don't make promises that you can't back up. And these reasons to believe are the bits that you use to back that up. And then the big idea is, when it all boils down to it, what is it that keeps that brand focused? Now, this is something when we go through the process, that there's a whole journey through all of this, which takes quite a long time, can be even months sometimes. And then the big idea sometimes is just 2 or 3 words even, or it might be, create, sell, share, or whatever that might be. It's the big idea. It's the guts. It's the real guts of what you're doing. Excuse me. So branding includes many different sort of layers to a process of what you need to do. This is not your homework, don't worry, it's not going to be complicated. I'm going to give you a few little tasks. You don't have to do it, but what I'm going to do is give you a couple of little tasks at the end of this session. And if you decide to do it and you decide to come on the next session next week, I will do a bit of a recap to help you, but it's really, even if you don't want to share what you do with the little tasks I'm going to give you, it just is going to help you to think, and it's going to help you to start on that process. I'm not going to sort of tell you that after an hour together today, you're suddenly going to know everything about branding and you're going to, and that's my job. It would make a bit of a mockery of what I do if that were the case. But what I would like is for it to sow lots of seeds, hopefully gives you a bit of information. But if you decide to do these tasks, it's going to help to start you sort of thinking along the right lines of going along that process. And hopefully, if you come with us on this sort of 4-week journey of going through the process, then it will help you to sort of think. When I do mentoring and business coaching, I do the same. I give homework after each session, and then it means that we're moving along a process. You're actually doing the work, but being guided, and it works really well. But homework sounds like, if I use the word homework, my son, he freaks out. I actually can't use the word. We have to use a different word because he hates it so much. So development, so research, and looking at all the pros and cons about naming. I mean, people quite often with the naming, though your brand isn't just your name or your mark, your logo, the name is super important. And actually just randomly thinking of a cool name is not really going to fly, especially now. But generally, there needs to be some backing and rationale around it. And especially once you set the values, which really, when we created Slingshots, we didn't name it until after the whole branding process, because it needed to come out of the values, the spirits. It needed to, yeah, I mean, it took a long time. It's not to say it has to take you a long time, but randomly picking names that sound cool and sound like they might work, it needs to have a bit of backing to it as well. So, you know, if you are doing a rebrand and looking at it even within the brand, the naming side of things, don't worry about that now. That's something that really comes at the very end. And you know, also the industries have changed quite a lot, so it is also something to think about sort of further down the line. You know, design process, the management, measurement. I'm going to flick through because I'm just conscious that I want to get through a little bit more of this, so that we've still got some questioning time. So branding is about building trust. So, you know, once you go through the process of setting your values, you create your messaging, you align with who your customers are, you go through the whole process. It's about building trust. You can do everything beautifully, amazingly. It can look great. It can be a cool name. You've got some good messages. You might have a great campaign. It all sits. But if it doesn't align with your customers and you can't build that trust, then you just have some nice products or a nice service. It's about that trust building. And I'm sure if you think about the brands that you buy into yourself for your own personal side of things, there has to be, there's an element of you trust them, even if it's, you're going to trust that it's going to arrive on time, or it's going to be made to a certain level, or you know that the packaging's really nice, or you agree with what they're putting out on their messaging around what they give a shit about, that it feels like you trust them because they align with your own personal values to some degree. So everything you do has to be about not undermining that trust and relationship that you're building, because that can have a massive impact on your business. So, you know, you build the brand and the values and set that underpinning, and then you work out your customer bases and align with them. Then you create all the assets around it. But then your job is about building trust. It's not about selling, because the more trust you build, the more sales you will have. But just shift your mindset from selling to building trust. Just even that wording of, you know, when you're creating a campaign for something, don't think of it as selling. Think about trust building. you will sell much more. It will become about sales, but try not to think from a sales perspective. Try to think of it as trust building. Now, this is a bit more in depth about each of the areas that I talked about. So I'm going to scan slightly through. If you want to take pics, then no problem. But I just want to get through some of this so that I can talk about some of the values, and I'm going to set you the homework, and you can also be asking me a few questions. So it's the nutshell, it's the nuts and bolts, it might be to do with some of the history around it, the origin of your brand, your history that has impact on the brand as owner, whether it is the sort of geographical location, might be, for example, Melton Mowbray pork pies. Part of that is around the location. It might be that you are using fabrics from a certain place, that the origin of some of that, or where you're located, is relevant, the point of difference. So the context that validates and the underpinning of what you're doing. You know, for example, like Charlotte Tilbury, you know, the point of difference is that it has her DNA, and she's a renowned makeup artist, and her profile around the clients that she's had becomes part of her root strengths, and likewise with similar brands. So some of the trends, I mean, obviously one of the big forces that we have going on at the moment is the pandemic, is all of these factors around it. Now, obviously in the beginning, we didn't know quite what impact that was going to have on a long-term basis. But those forces around the world of any of the industries, and you know, sort of on a smaller and bigger scale, they do become your friend if you engage and understand that and use it. And like I said at the beginning, it is a really brilliant time for small business, and part of your messaging is around that trust, because it's more of a personal experience, around the customers being able to understand your process maybe a bit more because it's a smaller business, around your root strengths might be your skill set. You might have been a fitness trainer for 20 years, for 10 years, and then you start an athleisure brand. That becomes a part of your root strengths that become a trend within the trends of the macro environment, but you can use that then as a part of your messaging as a strength within your branding. You know, whether it's the political, economic, obviously the whole focus on sustainability on a more broad sense now becomes a trend that can be used on a wider level. You know, before it was trying to educate as well as sort of create force around your brand, but now there's much more education around a lot of that, and much more focus for people, because they are starting to think more about their footprint and the impact they have on the world. So all of that becomes useful trends for you to use. All of those things around the macro environment, and then the micro is the closer to you. So competitors, suppliers, employers, shareholders, if it's like bigger, customers, media. So all of those things, the macro and micro. But this is one thing that I did learn. You know, it was taught in that way 25 years ago, and it's still relevant. Is that the impact of the micro and the macro environment on what you're doing and with branding, your positioning. So whether it is taglines and sort of branding, where you sit, you know, it's help to differentiate. I'm going to whiz very slightly quickly through this because I just want to get to the value stuff so that you have more to work on and taking away. And the competitive markets, I mean, it depends on what industry you're in, and it might be something you want to even ask any questions about. Quite often in the past, people have said, oh, I don't have any competitors because no one else is doing what I'm doing. No one else is making green beads from Africa in this location. And actually, what you need to be asking yourself within the competitive market is, if you, for example, are making jewelry, it's who else are people wearing if they're not wearing yours? Now, they might not have discovered the specific amazing technique that you do and the style that you do, but if they're not buying yours, they're buying something else. And it's not necessarily another brand that does exactly what you do. Or glasses. If I'm not wearing these, who else might I be wearing? you know, these are qubits, but so if I wasn't going there, where else might I go? It doesn't need to be another pair of exactly these glasses, but think a bit more broadly of, if you're selling, for example, loungewear or whatever, it's who else are people buying into if it's not you, or on whatever level. If you're a stylist or if you're a photographer, you know, who are people going to if it's not you? And starting to think, you know, what they might be doing next, and not to use that as a copycat scenario, but it's understanding what else is going on shouldn't help determine your behavior, but it should have an impact on it, whether it's reacting or whether it is using any of that information to align. And you've got various different types of competitors. So direct, alternatives. So they might, for example, if someone is a direct competitor would be, if I'm a popcorn brand, it's another brand of popcorn. If it's an alternative, it might be that it's crisps because it's another snack. It might be that sort of a more available spend competitor. It could be a soft drink because I'm going to pick something and it might be one of those things. So it's sort of thinking exactly the same as you, similar area, or you know, if I'm going to spend my money, am I going to spend it on a pair of trainers, or might I buy a book or whatever? It's whatever you can use their money for. Like I say, this is something that can't give too much time on this one, but we will. I can touch on it a bit more maybe on the next couple of sessions, but it's a massive area for understanding, and there's quite a bit of detail that you can go into. But the more you can understand about your customers, the better, because then it means that you're speaking the language, it's supply and demand, you're creating things that they want, you understand their needs. But I think the brilliant thing about social media, and especially even like Instagram lives, stories, you can have a really great communication level with your customers and your audience. You ask questions. Don't be afraid to, if you don't know what they like, or what kind of, you know, what shoe style they want this week, or how ask them how they're feeling. People like to be engaged with. They like to feel like you give a shit about them, but they also like to think that you are thinking about them. They like to feel valued, and they like to feel like you care. And actually, if they think you're asking those kinds of questions, like, oh God, you know, this brand cares about me and is interested and is going to, so like I say, don't guess, ask good questions, and you will more than often get good answers. Presumptions never work. You might be lucky sometimes, but rarely. Normally it's you know, removing bias, so that you're not projecting on them. Don't make people feel like you're forcing something on them. Make them feel a part of the journey within branding. So some of the touch points for customer experience, within the purchase and post-purchase. If you are screenshotting anything, it might be a useful one. And this sort of spans more than just the sort of branding process. I won't go through all of it, but it's, you know, what can impact the sort of the awareness of your brand and afterwards. But this is the full brand experience. So once you've developed all of this, this is then the process that you take the customer on. So I'm going to just whiz through. Actually, I'm going to stop the share for 2 minutes, and I'm just going to find the right tile so that I can go through that properly and go through the values, because I just want you to look at, apologies for this at the moment. Am I talking too fast? Is this lots that you already know? Is it conjuring up questions already? Do you feel like you're on track, or how's everyone feeling right now on what we're at? Is there any, the word homework makes you freak out? Yeah.
I think you sound good. It's good so far. Yeah.
Good. Don't worry about the homework word. I just wanted to pull up the values bit so I'm not flicking through all of it for you. So values, I mean, just, you can even do a show of hands. Have people thought within the branding what they do about values so far? I mean, you could even do a thumbs up. You don't have to show your face. Does anyone want to do a reaction icon and No, it's kind of. I saw a kind of. Anyone want to? Some of you have. Oh, yeah, Joanna has. Yeah, I mean, it's there can be a lot of confusion around it of sort of what values are, and also you know, what's oh god, sorry, you know, looking at my, oh, can I just stop this 1 second? I do apologize. It's flipped. This flipped about. I apologize for that. It's values are what you care about as a brand, and it is. Let me just grab that back. There we go. Apologies for this technology. I would like to say quite often have my trusty assistant with me doing the slides so that I'm not flipping about, but makes me sound like a bit of a wanker. Oh Jesus, sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm not there we go, and I'll just leave it like that. So they're the roots of your business. It is the moral compass. It's the underpinning. So we often talk about the sort of, well, it's the foundations. We very often work on 4 values, just because it is literally like the foundations of your building, the building of your business. And you have to think about the wording very carefully, and it's not something you just say, oh yeah, I think that's it. It's something you need to sit on and take a bit of time over. The way that we do it, whether it's through mentoring, whether we're doing a branding project for someone, is that we go through pulling information around your behavior, personality, how you relate to others, what you care about, what's important to you as a business and brand, and brainstorm a load of ideas, put down a load of words. Quite often some things people put down aren't actually values. They might be more the spirit or personality. And also what I will get people, what I'm going to actually ask you to do as well, is to then look at all the synonyms of it. Now, there's some wording that, for example, empowerment's always a really good one, because people are like, yeah, empowerment, I'm empowering as a brand. But actually, if you look at the meaning of it and the synonyms of the word empowering and empowerment, it's actually really dictatorial and quite negative. So it's not good to have as a value. It might be, though, that there's a word within there that's a better word as a value. When you set the values, you have to be sure that everything you do can be consistent with that. So if you, for example, authenticity as a value, you have to be sure that on every level that you can be authentic in your behavior, in the way you speak, in the imagery you put out there, the campaigns, the products, whatever wording you use. One, it becomes the place for you to keep going back to. It is the underpinning for every decision making, and even now, for me as a business, we still go back to them. And if you're like, should I align with that brand, go back to the values. And if it doesn't align, it's no, or it's yes. It makes it very, very easy. But you really need to be sure, if sustainability is something that is important to you as a brand, for example, as a value, be sure that you can follow that through, or ethical sort of consciousness, or you have to just be sure that there can't be a place that you slip up and that it doesn't align. That it goes back to everything. So, for example, trustworthy, creative. You have to make sure, if creative is a word that you feel aligned, that can't just be to do with the products that you're creating. It has to be the way you speak. So even when you're communicating with your customers, you need to make sure that the wording you use is creative. Now, that doesn't mean it needs to be like all over the joint, but it just needs to feel a bit more thought out than business-like. So it's less business-like and needs to feel creative. The word like heritage, you might feel like you're a bit of a heritage brand, but you need to make sure, one, whatever you're doing now, but also what you think you might do in the future. Like, don't think about just the present. you need to think, okay, well, if you think that maybe in 5-10 years you might want to bring out a sister brand to what you're doing, or another line, or another part of the service that you offer, you need to think about that now. You know, so if that not everything's going to be heritage, that you might bring out a diffusion part of what you do, then that's not the right word to have as a value. If customer care is king as a value, then you cannot slip up on that. Everything has to be around that. It gives you a real focus to what you're doing. If professional, for example, is a value, you've got to make sure that everything is about being professional. And you know, defining these values and refining them, or if you're already going, you may have put some values in place. You need to go back on those. It is fine to go back on them, but this is what you do within the branding process first. Looking at the values is one of the first things that I want you to do, but one of the things you need to think about. You can't think about the spirit and personality yet until the values is the first thing to start with. And it helps to differentiate your business, as we talked about. It helps to create the whole sort of shape of what you're doing. And it is the cornerstone. It quite literally is the cornerstones. If you're working out what to do as far as your website, the values, it needs to keep going back to the values. If it is about being dynamic, for example, then it needs to feel dynamic on all levels, on the tone of voice, on the, you know, sort of the imagery, on the wording. Everything has to be going back to that. The best way to start is brainstorming and just putting down a list of words. Start with that. Anything that you think, just even knee-jerk reaction, start with words that you feel are values. Like I say, and then I want you to, this is what then I want you to look at the synonyms for all of those words. So look at all the other variations of those words. You might start off with 10 words. That's fine, because you'll quite quickly be chucking words out as you go through this. Look at the synonyms, look on Google, look at the synonyms, look at the wording around it. One, you might find out other words that you think are better, but also it will validate that value. And when you choose those words to begin with in your brainstorming, you need to think about all the areas of your business. Don't just think, you know, yeah, I'm a creative business, I'm, you know, whatever. You need to think about from all levels. So for customer facing, internally, it has to be on all levels. Eventually, I want you to end up with 4 to 6. No, you don't really need any more than those, because otherwise it can become a little bit confusing. Because you will also have the spirit and personality as well, but they need to be strong. This is like literally the underpinning. You know, and it's stuff like, for you, what's a deal breaker? What is there within what you're doing that it's a deal breaker? If it's not about, for you, if it is a customer, if everything you do is about the customer, you know, what is it that you know, that will sort of break it for you? And look at the brand alignment around it. Look at those sort of words around it that you know, to double check on it. You know, even look at whether these words are used in other industries. Think about your personal values and see how they relate, and if any of that relates within a sort of within a business perspective. You know, if it is loyal, being heart-centered. If you're a female business that's for females, maybe it's for mums, for example. You know, if all that you do is about being very heart-centered, then just go backwards and forwards over this, just to double check and make sure. This is our values as a business, just as an example for you, so that you can see sort of where we are. And actually what you can also do as a part of homework is look at this. I'm in the process actually of doing some work on our website, because actually I'm going back to it. Again, this last year's thrown a lot of things up for us. In all different ways, and actually, you know, for me, this year has really reaffirmed the focus on inclusivity and diversity in all that we do. We did a massive series of lives. I now wonder how I did it, but I did 3 lives a week through that first period for weeks and weeks in the first lockdown. with all different experts and creatives, and taught everything. I don't actually know I did it actually, because homeschooling was even worse than in the first lockdown. But for me, I'm in the process of going back over a lot of the early work, not necessarily the values, but some of the other work. And it's something that you keep doing, but just so that you can see, and maybe you can have a look, and actually you can come back to me and say whether you think that you can see that through the social, through our website, and see whether you feel like it makes sense and connects. But being synergistic is really important, because we're very much about collaboration, teamwork, alliance, symbiosis. So these are the meanings and the synonyms underneath it. Being dynamic, everything's kind of quite energetic and kind of quite compelling, and being very focused and strategic. So that's the kind of planning kind of side of things, but then the creativity, it has to come through the wording as well as the look and the feel. And so if you could kind of look over some of that and see whether you feel that that is aligned from our perspective. There is literally a whole load more that I could be going through on branding, but we've got a series of 4, and I'm conscious of wanting to be able to let you to ask some questions, if anyone has any, around what I've talked about or around your business. If you understand what I'm asking you to do, like I say, you don't have to share it next time, but it will be good for you to do the exercise. And then we can go through some of them at the beginning of next time, or not if you don't want to. But it will help you to get along this process of thinking, if that makes sense and you are all willing. But has anyone got any questions up till now? Has it been useful? Does it make you freak out, or do you think, yeah, I've got this, I'm already doing this, all good? Let me unshare my screen so I can see all the comments now as well.
Yeah, that was really great, Zoe. So thank you so much for that. If anyone wants to use their microphone to ask questions, then please feel free to do so. Yeah, love to hear from you guys.
Hi, thank you so much. It was super helpful.
Okay.
I just joined like in the middle of the meeting, so sorry if you touched
No
on
worries.
something I haven't been on there. But
No worries.
like I was wondering, if you have like different values, how do you combine them together so you show them? Let's say diversity, creativity. If you just have like 4 different ones, how can you show all of them to the consumer? And yeah.
Well, what I would say is they should be really different. So your 4 values, for example, what you need to think about is when you end up with the 4, 6 values, is that they need to cover every area of what you do. So it might be that one area is very much about the business side of things. Like so when you saw ours, so like the synergistic side is about the collaboration, that is about the strategy, that's the creative bit, and that's the dynamic. And it's all 4 of those bits that come together that create the whole spirit of what we do. And maybe what I will do next time is talk a little bit more about spirit and personality, because that becomes the translation of your values through visual and sort of tone of voice almost. But if for example you've got one that's more about the way you behave, one that's kind of, or one's kind of well, I mean, you saw the 4 that I have were quite different. So you don't have to be showing everything all at the same time. But if one is about your processes and, it's for example, sustainability, you don't need to be in every communication talking about sustainability. Some of it you will be showing people through your actions. So I think this is about how you behave internally as well as what you project out to the world. So it might be that, some of that is about, if for example, being synergistic for us is about external collaborations, even this, with Alone Design Club, but then it's also internally. So it might be that there's teamwork going on internally as well. It's on every level. It might be that, for example, like in social media, I'm bigging up someone or talking about someone else that's not my business or not, but it's about sort of collaboration. So it's on all levels. So they should be really different, and it's not about talking about all of them at the same time. It's about how you act. This is not really about just messaging. And really the crux of this is about, as I said in the beginning, oh, maybe you missed the beginning, is branding is about a feeling, and it's about how you behave, how you speak, how you act, and it's all of that. And actually, if you put out to the world, both through every level, a certain experience, then you don't even need to be using those words ever. There's a 4 values. It's not about using those words. You don't actually ever have to. I don't really talk about, I don't say we're dynamic, or I don't necessarily, it's not even about how I describe, it's how I act, and it's the work we do, it's the way we behave. And it's, so I think once you work out those words, it will make more sense. So I think make sure that the words cover everything you do. So if you know, sort of trust, for example, is a really important value, you know, that you want to create trust, that you act in a way that's trustworthy, you're not going to be talking about that. You're just going to behave in a way that conjures up trust from other people, you know. So I think when you work it out, it won't become as confusing as to how to use it. These aren't 4 words that you're going to use in your language necessarily. It's about how you're going to behave.
Okay.
And being consistent, really. And the one thing with your values, it's about consistency. So if you at any point sort of, it's when I talked about trust before, you know, if you act inconsistent with your values, then that's where you can't build up the trust quite so much. So yeah, it's the build, really. Brand is not called brand building for no reason, but it's about the build. So
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. And you know, when someone's saying, you know, wanting to hear more about the communication of it, for sure, I think what I would say is, within this kind of process, and the beauty of having 4 stages within this, if any of you want to join us, I know Amanda and Lonesome would love you to come along, and as would I. That it's I don't even want you to think about how you communicate these yet. So the whole benefit of sort of the business coaching mentoring that we do as one thing is that there's so much to think about as a small business, and it can be so overwhelming and confusing. The point of this is I would just want you to focus on one thing at a time and think about it really hard and work on it. And so I actually don't want you to think about how you're going to communicate this yet. Even if you've done your values, I want you to go back over, even if you have them set within your business, I want you this week to go back over them. And I want you to be really, really sure that they're right. So don't worry about how you communicate them. For now, forget that. Just focus on what they are and that they're right. And as far as understanding how to then put them out there, we can talk about that in the next few sessions. But having them right is super important first. So just do that. And this is why, like, within another thing sort of to say, I suppose, that is one thing to let you know about, is we do creative mentoring and business coaching, where it's we do one-to-one on this and go through whatever process, whichever stage you're at, or whatever you want to go through. But the whole point of that is for you just to focus on one thing at a time and get that right, and then move on to the next. This is all a process. Whatever stage of the business, there's a process. And so forget that, Paola, or anyone else. Don't think about how we're going to get it out there after. Let's get them right first. So by next week, if you're coming back, that you might not have it right, you might not be sure. And of course, without this being one-to-one, I can't go really deeply into everyone's, but we can share a bit to help you go through it. And then, of course, if any of you do want more one-to-one work, then we are offering a bit of a sort of lockdown scenario for LDC gang anyway as well. But for now, between now and then, all I want you to do is think about what they are, do the research around the synonyms, and you might put 10, 20 down to begin with and then reduce it. But that's all I want you to think about this week. You have permission to ignore everything else until we get those right, because that is going to have an impact on everything else. Like, it's going to be, you know, and that's it. You just have to get this right first. This is like one of the most important things. You're going to look back at this and think, shit, that was good, because now I've got that right. And then even if you don't do anything else with me or even loan design, that you can go from there. If you do go on more of a journey with me, with loan design, whatever, brilliant. But that is the one thing I want you to get from today and to work on. The rest of the stuff was contextualizing that, but that's the one thing I want you to focus on. That helps. Has anyone else got, oh, Juliet, have you got a question? Yeah.
I suppose how would you, can you hear me okay? I haven't got a microphone.
Okay, get closer, madam.
How would you whittle down your values? I mean, when you talk about, I would say that honesty, being true, should be with in any brand, surely. Sustainable, make sure as much as possible what you do along the journey is.
Yeah, but it's the
etc. So to a certain extent, I think, well, they should be taken as read. Trustworthy, read. You know, that should be.
yeah. You'd be surprised though. It's, oh, I can't hear you. Right.
Maybe those are two of my values or one of my values anyway. Maybe that is.
But the fact you've mentioned it means they're important to you. And I think don't presume they're important to everyone.
Okay.
So I think that the fact that you've mentioned trustworthy and honesty, if that's fundamentally, it's what's more important than anything, you know, so it might be like, so for, yes, trustworthy and honesty should be important to everyone. But it's not necessarily the big focus for everyone. And I think if for you, it's the fundamentals of who you are as a brand, building that trust, then that's one of your values, you know, that's, and also you what I would say is within working out the values, you don't want, for example, 2 that mean a similar thing. What you end up wanting is 4 that cover different areas. So it might be that you, in brainstorming, come up with, for example, 5 words around that idea of being trustworthy and honesty. And then it's going through a bit of a process of working out which is really the right one. Because it'll be one that's right. And you're not going to know straight away. But I think it's what's the most important to you as a brand. And I think, you know, I haven't got trustworthy as a value on our values. And that doesn't mean that we're not trustworthy, but it's not the thing beyond other things. It's, you know, of course that the honesty comes, like authenticity is also a word that can be used for that trustworthy or honesty side of things, because it's about being true to yourself. And what you should do in going through this process is really think about it. Is it the being honest, or is it just about being very true? In which case it might be authenticity might be the word that covers both, for example. So it's for you, it's going through the different variations of all of that to work out the right one. You know, and if you know that is something that's you, then I think the fact you brought it up means it's important to you. Now, of course, it should be on a level to everyone, but it's not necessarily the main focus, whereas it might be for you. And that makes sense.
Is it to me as a person, as the owner of the brand?
Or this is the brand. No, this is the brand we're talking about. This is not personal branding. It has to be. Now, of course, you as an owner of the brand are going to have an impact on the brand, but for example, you sell this next year, which I'm, you know, obviously got no idea what your bigger idea as far as project, but for example, you need to set this up so that if you are removed from the table, that the brand still exists on its own. Yeah, so it's the brand, it's not personal.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and what I would, you know, what I might, maybe I'll do it on the next one, but is, you know, in thinking, one thought I'm just going to set with you as well, and this is not even just sort of on the branding side, it's just something to think about. Quite often, especially with small business, people just don't dream big enough, and they decide they want to have a brand that means that they can do it full time and they're not in another job. It brings in enough money, they have a nice amount of customers, they sell in a few wholesale stockists, and that might be the dream. You can only achieve what you dream. You can't, you generally won't achieve more than that, because you need to dream big enough that it can grow. So all I would say is think about what that dream is, of what is the ultimate. And I know a couple of people I've sort of worked with that they did really well. They achieved everything. It just, they didn't dream big enough. It didn't go any further. And, you know, one of the things that, one of the courses or programs that I'm going to be running soon is also a lot about visualization for business, and sort of incorporating some of the manifesting. But you need to be able to visualize what you want. And if you can't dream of that dream, it's okay if you want to keep it at a certain level, but don't expect that if you can't imagine it bigger, that it will just happen. It doesn't work like that. You have to have imagined it that big, because if you can't imagine it that big, how the bugger is anyone else? So, you know, it's just have a little think on that as well, is what is the ultimate big idea dream lifestyle wise for you? Is it that you want to, when we're allowed to be sat on a beach somewhere with a lifestyle, you've got teams, there's no dream too big. But if you don't imagine it and visualize it, it will never happen. So don't just think that if you get it to a certain stage, it will just grow on to the next stage. It doesn't work like that. So just have a think of what that bigger idea is, even though it might be 10 years off. It might not be. It might be that it happens quicker. It might be 2 years off. It might be next. Who bloody knows? But you need to have visualized it, because no one else is going to do that for you in business. This is the one thing with having your own business. No other bugger's going to do it. You've got to do it. You've got to imagine it, and then you've got to be a part of making it happen. But then you can bring in people to do that. But you have to visualize it first. So
Love that.
just think big enough. Because I think, you know,
preached.
well, do you know what I think that, and especially now, you know, I think I mean, I'm a true believer that anything's possible, and I think that, and that is one of my big sort of benefits and flaws as a person and as a business. You know, I think everything's possible, so I try and make everything possible. But that also means that is not, you know, you can't do everything. But I think things generally don't happen unless you believe they can happen. You know, that's and within the world of small business, that's so important, more than bloody the problem with some of the big businesses is they think too big, and then they don't fucking think they've got to be authentic enough to follow it through in a way that builds trust and builds all the other stuff that we're talking about now. You know, they need to do more of this work, and they don't think they need to. Let me get my hands on them.
I think that's a great kind of note of inspiration to kind of finish on there, which has been, you know, I think that's been a really great introduction to exactly what branding is, and to have the opportunity to go away and like think about that more will be really good and helpful. And then, you know, we've got 3 more sessions. Yeah. So we'll really go deeper and develop those thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, and if you do the work, then come back with the thoughts you've got, and maybe, you know, if you get in at the beginning, you can ping them all in, and we can have a kind of a quick look over at it. You know, like I say, you don't have to, but I think it's a useful thing to do. And I think it will, you know, if you've got time, and since, you know, the lovely LDC are offering this, it's an amazing opportunity to just go through a bit of a process. And especially lockdown is such a good time to be doing it, because, you know, on some levels, some of the business side of stuff, you can't be doing everything at this time. But and I'll just sow a tiny seed, but I can tell you more about it next week, is that we're going to be running a program, sort of incubator / accelerator program, not at all in competition with LDC, but very different, that we are, it's brand and PR. So I'm going to be sponsoring a certain number of brands that they will get a level of PR and business coaching for a 3 to 12 month program, which makes sort of PR really affordable. And there's a whole load of amazing experts that are going to be on it, including Karen Franklin and loads of other brilliant people, not just from fashion, from all areas, that are going to be doing some little talks. She's doing a talk on identity. I've got people doing it on value systems and all sorts. So I'll tell you more about it next time. But that's just something for you, you know, that's something just to let you know about, that will be that, you know, I'll be liaising with the gang, but I'll let you know a bit more next week. But sowing some little seeds.
Great. Well, yeah, so thank you so much for that, Zoe. That was a super informative session. Lots and lots of notes. So thank you for taking us through all of that. And thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.
Please do make sure that you sign up to next week's session and the week after that and the week after that. You know, the links are all on the website. And yeah, this will also be available on YouTube very shortly. So if there was anything that you did miss, then feel free to check it out then. But yeah, thank you so much, Zoe. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Thanks everyone. Have a great evening. Bye.
Thank you.
See you later, gang.